Live from the Pathway Studios in Johnston proper, you are Live from the Path.
And you're listening to Live from the Path. We're coming to you for the Pathway Studios here in Johnston proper.
Maybe, as far as you know.
Yeah, it could be a lie. The internet does what it wants.
Sure does.
We could be in beautiful the San Fernando Valley.
Okay, so I had an argument with the children yesterday.
Yep.
That I implied that by naming something like New Jersey or New York, you're implying that the old York was not good enough and you have to be an improvement.
No, people often did that to honor where they were from.
No, this is
I
the
was
new
from
one.
York. This is the New York.
It's also folks who have high hopes. In Missouri, there's a town called New London, and I think that they just had really, really great hopes for what this town's
That
going
it
to
might
be.
have been a swing and a miss.
They have a gas station. I'm not mad at New London, just high hopes.
There's a guy that goes to school called the Tube.
Oh man, his wife really must have had a rough go. Like the guy who founds the town, and he could have called it like Derricksville or Johnstontown or something like that. And instead, he goes, "This is the New London."
Bold.
Mind the gap.
Either she had to really believe in him or lived a really, really crappy life in the same house. All right, here's what we got going on the show this evening. We looked for...
Hold on. You have to introduce our guest.
Okay, sorry. Greg Hudson is here. Now, he's been on the show before. You've met Greg.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Mike, you've met him.
I've met him.
Yeah. So two things. One, Greg Hudson is on the show. Thanks for coming in, Greg. I'm excited, especially like, with the topics we have tonight. I feel like he's the man to have.
I definitely agree.
Second, the question for the night, and you don't have to answer this. If you're on the audio, just the podcast only. Actually, I'm good if you want to weigh in. But the question is whether Mike is a vest man.
Oh.
Because he's wearing a vest. He came in here with a vest on.
First thing I noticed.
Yeah.
But it's not like a Patagonia vest.
No.
For you West Siders.
No.
This is
Like-
not an REI situation.
No.
Yeah. This
Like
looks like he jumped a rookie cow farmer.
Yeah, like a wrangler or maybe a guy that works on trains.
Yeah, but like it's
train
only
man.
looked on one train or handed a guy tools who worked on a train or who like took pictures of the cows while someone else inoculated them.
Now,
That's the state of this vest.
I'm gonna tell you two things right off the bat. One, this is my initial gambit into the vest world. I keep seeing a lot of people with vests, and I think I could pull off a vest. So I told my wife, and she got me this lovely vest used from the old Well thrift shop in Knoxville, and to foray into it and give it a shot.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you the second thing, Ben, and this is where you can shut up for a minute. Everybody loves this vest.
Who?
It commands nothing but respect.
From an actual cow hand?
I'm gonna tell you a story. I walked
Out
into
of work gaucho.
I walked into the Casey's in this vest. I went and got myself a medium soda in this vest.
Yeah.
I walked up to the counter with said medium soda, and I said, "Hey, man, how's it going?" He goes, "Is that all you're getting, friend?" And I said, "Yep." He goes, "We'll see you later." And I went and I left.
No.
How much did I pay for that soda, Ben?
Yeah, you thefted it.
I paid in respect.
Whatever.
Oh, what? Vestal respect.
Your baptism into that vest is one of theft, degradation.
Everyone loves this vest.
Wow,
My
free
wife says
soda.
it's smoking hot, and my other brother seems to think it looks pretty nice
Yeah,
on me.
no,
In fact, he said, after I said, "Hey, man, be honest with me. What do you think of this vest?" And his eyes got real big, and he looked at me and said, "I've also recently considered becoming a vest man."
Okay.
And then we high-fived.
Yeah, okay, the guy at the Casey's looks at you coming up and goes, "This looks like a man of low moral character." And if I don't give him this for free, he might burn his cigarette onto my arm.
No way. He gave me the peace sign. That's how you knew it was legit.
Oh,
That
you
was
didn't say the peace sign.
Yeah.
You didn't say that at all.
Peace
No.
sign came right up.
He was begging for peace.
Anyway.
He thought you intended to bring ruckus.
All I hear right now is the ramblings of a sad, pathetic non-vest wearer. That's what I hear.
I
right
like
now.
it. I like it, Mike.
Thanks, Ray Hudson.
The Bible says, "Lord make me a vestal," and you
Yeah,
got it.
yeah, vestal.
Hey, that's plural vests, unless you're wearing two.
Hey, actually, just before we roll into the topics,
Yeah.
we made like a on our knees begging plea for people to submit things to the 10-year.
Yeah.
Did you have any submissions?
Yes.
No kidding.
No.
What?
Okay.
No. I thought of a number of characters I might betray on the way here, but so far, no one has submitted any indication that Live from the Path, in preparation for the 500th episode, which is about 2.5 months away. So far, no one has contributed anything to say Live from the Path has positively impacted me in the following
And we
manner.
made I mean, a complete fool of ourselves.
We
Like
debate-
begging people, just tell us that it's made any impact in your life at all. And no one has submitted
I
anything.
debased myself. I wore a vest, and that's where we left it. But say there's still time. You can hit up on the complaint line 515-517-0085. Call or text if you've got anything to share. We're going to try to put together some self-glorifying media in honor of our hanging around for 500 episodes. And if you want to be a part of that, even if it's for your own vanity, just submit that to the Live from the Path complaint line. Or if you've got something else, like you took a selfie video or something like that, and you want to send it to us, you can do the message function there on the Facebook if you like the Facebook page, or you can say info@livefromthepath.org, and we'd love to hear whatever you got.
It's a great investment in the show.
Yeah,
that's gotta
very
stop.
nice. Hey, 500 episodes is nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, gosh, me and some buddies did a podcast. We made it to 18 episodes.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna share what that podcast is because I'm a big believer in not promoting another piece of work while you're on a current piece of work. So I'm not gonna do that.
Wait a minute.
So-
But is it still live? Like you might do so.
yeah, you could find a podcatcher and find that podcast. I'll let you know after the show is done.
Okay, we'll talk about the name of that thing.
Very good.
No, it's called the TV Yearbook.
Oh,
Hey, this people go on to shows for this, so we won't overkick the puppy. But like, if you go on there, Greg and some friends, they go back through kind of old TV shows.
We do.
I want to say like childhood TV
We
shows.
watch the best and the worst episodes, and we evaluate them
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
of certain TV shows.
How do you know the best and the worst before the show starts?
Oh, we go to the internet and find out what they have to say because the internet is to be trusted.
Okay, this is what leads us to our first topic of discussion.
It does. That's what we call a segue in the game.
So if if I was Ben, tell me the scuttlebutt on this thing.
Okay, some of this is in my mind, but I think probably in others' minds. It's the proliferation of AI. And I saw, I want you to be careful, you people the conspiracy theorists. Like, we're talking about what I think are practical implications on maybe unintended consequences. Yes, that's what I want. Not blatant nefariousness, although I'm sure it exists, but like just being thoughtful. And so here's what I saw. I saw 3 examples of this over the last 7 to 10 days that hit me. The first one was if you search for ChatGPT. Or I think it's chatai.org. They basically, it's a public launch or release of a conversational chat artificial intelligence. And its core thing is intending to solve kind of conversational questions where you might go to Google and just type in 3 words that you think are relevant, and it comes back and finds you kind of a curated set of answers, or here's what we think you're looking for. This, you can do something like, I said, hey, how can this chat functionality through AI be used to benefit an insurance company? And it wrote me like a 5 to 6 paragraph article to describe it.
Wow.
And it was pretty darn good. Like, I'd kind of thought about the question. I looked through, and like, it's competent. I saw another example of some pastors who were like, hey, can you produce me an expositional sermon that ties together the Sermon on the Mount, the death of Jesus, and the birth, the narrative from Luke 4. And it spit out like a 2-page sermon, and again, pretty darn good. Like, I didn't see anything to argue with in this sermon that it produced.
The AI was scriptural.
It was. It did a really good job. And like, it wasn't clunky. It was conversational. Like, someone totally could have written it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of thought of like, hey man, it's the creation of content to say, hey, what are the top 10 mistakes that every college freshman makes? And maybe this thing can come up with it, and you just publish it on your blog, and you're like, look.
Because it's organic, right? It's not looking for an article that already exists.
That's right. Now, I mean, it's using, the way AI works is you feed it a bunch of stuff. It's artificial intelligence, meaning it uses existing information, text, web pages, pictures, all kinds of things. It ingests them. It gets like a view or a framework of a world, and then it should be able then to react to things, even creating things out of whole cloth based upon what it knows already and the information you already provided it, which differs from Google. Like, if you Google something, it's simply curating. It's going to go find something that already exists and go, we think this helps with what you were after. This can create something out of whole cloth. So,
now, do you have to have like an account to interact with this thing?
For this, if you go, again, I think it's chatai.org, because I tried it. You just have to give it an email address. They're trying to make sure that you're not, there's not bots hitting it. So there's like some level of validation to make sure you're a person.
Now hold on. Listen to this Mysterio world.
Okay.
What if a bunch of bots asked the AI a bunch of questions?
Okay.
Is this where we're going? Because now I'm getting freaked out.
Okay, so
Getting freaked out, Ben.
So kind of. Let me give you the two other examples, and then I want to talk to you about the things that were in seemed like red lights, flashing orange.
Mike,
at
don't
the
worry,
very
bots
least.
can't pick which one has the crosswalk in it. So
That's true.
I think they're not going to make
I've
it
been
past the
outgunning them
first
for
layer.
years.
Where are the stoplights? I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so the second was image generation, and so there's a pretty popular app called Lensa, Lensa, and they use artificial intelligence to kind of generate images that are they're pretty cool looking. There's a particular art thing to them, and this comes on the heels of a different AI image generator that was going around for like a couple months ago, where like you could just describe something in text and it would create it. So you could say a 8-foot tall man wearing an Abraham Lincoln hat, riding on a unicorn, crossing Abbey Road in the style of MC Escher, and like it could do it. It could do it. Now, there's things that it didn't do very well. Like it tended to give people like 6 fingers, but like generally speaking, it did a really good job of producing this thing that you described. As a matter of fact, there's a scuttlebutt over the last few days because some guy just published a children's book using completely AI generated images for his book. And but there's a real risk in this Lensa app. Because like you basically give it 20 pictures of your own, and what they were finding, at least at its earliest iterations, is it tended to create images that at some point like had some offensive to it, like that were offensive. So like women tended to be sexualized, even if the only thing you provided it was like children's pictures, like pictures of you as a kid or something like that. There's also like cultural stuff where like I read an article from an Asian lady, and she said basically 20% of the images came back and like her breast size was double, and a few of them she was like they created a naked image of her. And so the interesting part then is you think it's doing that because something about what they're reading in the pictures you provided, you then kind of use all the pictures that were fed into it or it was trained on, which is like all kinds of stuff from all over the internet, and it says, we think this is what you're after. And it creates them. And so like scary invasion of privacy, deep fakes of creating pictures of people that like for events that never existed. So third example, I saw there's a website where you can it's like an AI riff maker. And so you can go on there and create, like tell it to create, this is what I tried. I said, create a blues riff in E minor that's funky, high, with strong bass and guitar. And it created one. And again, this isn't like it went and found one in the archives of all the music that exists somewhere. It created something brand new that didn't otherwise previously exist. And so this is all pretty cool. It's really, really cool to be able to like with basic inputs see like things being created in front of you. But a couple things, and we're going to focus on the second one. The first one is like there's all kinds of interesting implications about like what are you replacing from a human perspective? I can generate articles like journalists and information on the internet, and it's being created and sourced from a place that already exists. Like that's copywriter jobs. These are illustrator jobs. Like, and even our notion of what it is to create art. Does a human have to do it? A guy submitted an AI created art into a state fair, and he won.
What?
And a bunch of the people were throwing a fit about it because like he probably just showed up and said like I said the Abe Lincoln on a unicorn. And so
did he share that after he won?
Yeah, he
because
said
you're just encouraging people to lie about it.
Yes.
Be like, I produced this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I don't think so. Well, and like
can like real art people spot the difference between an AI generated thing or a curated thing?
It depends on what it is. Like I like it's an immature, like it's maturing the AI, which is always true for AI. But like I've actually looked even for my day-to-day job, I have some exposure to how you think about AI. AI is only good as the things you put into it, and it's always maturing. The more it sees, the better it gets because you're continually providing context.
But I think that's the language that starts getting in trouble. Like when you say better.
Oh, yeah.
Like the more that it sees, it depends on what you let it see, right? Like if you think of it like people giving Rottweilers a bad name, right? And they're like, there's not bad pit bulls, there's bad pit bull owners, right? And so like AI seems to be like that, right? Like if you treat it away, like it's still curated, it's just curated on the input, not the output.
Yes. So now think about and this is number 2, and this is the thing that started kind of flashing in my mind, is how easy it is to change or control or shift cultural narratives, norms, and facts. If you can auto-generate content that otherwise represents a particular view of the world. Because if you think about, if these things are as good as what you're feeding into it, the guys who created the image program where you could type in the unicorn and the Abe Lincoln, they warned, or even the Lensa guys, like, warned and said, we trained this thing based upon what was out on the internet. But, like, you guys have been on the internet. This is a cesspool. It's full of some of the vilest stuff you've ever come across. And there's inherent, don't over-index on the word and the heaviness of it, but there is inherent bias in it. The things that end up on the internet and the things that don't. Most of my family pictures, for example, aren't on the internet for everyone to take in. But like violent events, news stories, sexual content, these are the things that proliferate the internet. Memes, right? Jokes and other things that are based upon stereotypes or other things that we laugh at ourselves about when you take it into context. Like,
think of all the pictures that were taken in the last year. Think of all the pictures taken in 2022. The number that were placed on the internet that are normal, so to speak, and then the number that are abnormal.
That's right.
99% of the pictures that were taken are pretty normal.
That's
have to
right.
imagine. But those aren't the pictures that are making it onto Facebook. Oh, a small percentage, a sliver of them.
That's right.
But then if you curate based on all the pictures in 2022, you get a really warped sense of
Yes.
what's normal.
Exactly right.
It's no good.
Exactly right. So then you got two options. The first one is that you go, well, you let it run free. Basically, it's going to spit out what it's going to spit out, which means that unchecked, you have Google, as an example, indexes by popularity. Here's the most popular article. If an AI application has a particular sense for what it thinks the right answers are to things, or what norms are, and then that content starts proliferating or duplicating itself very, very quickly, and becomes popular simply by how many places it's referenced and used, you can shift a cultural narrative very, very quickly. Very quickly. And so, and it's not a 1-year problem, but a 10-year, you could completely shift how people think of things. It's a bit of like a Ministry of Information, what am I thinking of, from 1984, right? Like, your ability to change, you don't actually have to change the thing that was said. You just have to over-represent this thing as a reality, and then because everything else is an algorithm and a bot, now it's all just representing like by volume. And the more that it contexts and uses that, the more likely it is to come up, and it represents something as being more true or more substantive than potentially what it actually is.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a risk in it.
Yep.
Right? But the alternative, however, is to say, well, you can't just let it run free because it's got inherent biases in it. Someone has to curate it. And this is the exact problem that we're having when you talk about social media, right? It's the things where Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and like all the major social media platforms are trying to figure out what do I show people and what do I not? What do I suppress? What do I not? Like, what's okay? What's culturally normal? This is what the one of the easiest things is that ladies who are breastfeeding often share things. Oh, look, it's cute. The baby's feeding, and it depends on the day and the algorithm. Sometimes it's obscene because there's a half a breast in there, and sometimes it's cute and it gets to go through. But who gets to make that cultural norm question of what can be shown and what can't be shown? And the change in Twitter guard from Jack Dorsey over to Elon Musk validated the exact problem, which is no one is actually going to be able to. In fact, we were talking about this with Facebook. Mike's I feel bad for Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Which is you're trying to play say what is and what is good and what is not good across 8 billion people over X number of countries. It's an impossible job.
Did I tell you I wrote him a Facebook Messenger? I don't know, 5 years ago.
I think you did say that.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was getting railed. Now the hubris to think that you could do this, I think, means that you might not quite understand the problem, right? But at the end of the day, he was being drug across the coals because of humanity's behavior. Not that his app was malfunctioning, right? It was basically, how could you allow this and not allow this? How could you allow this?
Yeah.
We should allow this, right? And that is so subjective between social mores, the community you're in, the people that you're around. And the thing that I'd sent him was as soon as the caveman, the figurative caveman, figured out how to chip something into his wall, he was saying how much his neighbor sucked. You know what I'm saying? As soon as he got an opportunity to say something for everybody to see, he did it, immediately.
Yep.
And so if I want to, whatever I want to do on Facebook, now granted, I totally believe that certain things are categorically obscene. If I go to see what my friends are doing, and they're for like example, their advertisements are showing me obscene things, then that seems like, that's their problem, right? But if like my friend is posting obscene things, that seems like my problem, right? Like, why am I friends with a guy that puts obscene things that I don't want to see? And my level of obscenity is probably different than other people's level of obscenity. And so, like, if you want to flood, say, my Facebook page with half-naked ladies, me and you aren't going to be friends no more, right? And that's just the deal. But that's not Mark's problem, and that's not Elon Musk's problem. That's the guy's problem, and I don't have to be friends with that dude, right? And so this is where the whole thing seems super difficult, because if you try to change that, hand that responsibility over to AI in any capacity, there's still a guy marking, like demarking, like saying this is good, this is no good. And if the thing gets to now listen, it's a strong possibility. The thing starts looking at it, and the AI goes, well, I don't agree with what you said is good and is no good. I'm going to move the flag myself a little bit over to the right. And then you say, it can't do this. Here's the thing. One line of code that you missed gives it the opportunity to reassess its own boundaries, right? It's not like it's literally thinking, but like when we put up boundaries, I don't know how many of y'all have like goats, sheep, cattle, right? Like every farmer will tell you put up a fence and you go, they will never get through this impenetrable force I've set up. And what will you find 2 weeks later on the other side of your brand new fence? A cow standing there going, how did you get out? And you walk the whole fence line, and you reassess everything, and everything's plugged in and working, and you go, what happened? I don't know. And so, like, that's AI, right? Like, AI, to me, that's what it is. It's like, even if you set it up boundaries and inherent, say, like, this is what I want you to know, like, you'll not think of everything that it can possibly do. It's a leak in a pool, Well,
because AI can think much quicker than you can.
Absolutely.
And it will think of things that you have never thought of.
That's right.
It will find a way outside of the fence, which means either Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk need to figure out a way to contain it, which is uncontainable.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or the government needs to find a way, which is impossible.
That's right.
Or we let AI just do what it wants, which also has wild concerns. And we're not trying to go down the road of conspiracies.
No,
Right.
But understanding that there's some concern here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like logical concern. Like I'll take it back out of the clouds, right? And like that wasn't meant to be like a conspiracy based thing.
I didn't take
But it's just the truth, right? Like even if you have a rudimentary understanding of how to program an Excel spreadsheet, you'll type the exact thing in that you want to happen, and then you'll stare at it and go, it didn't do it at all. What happened?
Yeah.
You put an apostrophe that didn't belong there. You put a space that you shouldn't have, right? Like just a small thing. And like the people that write these codes, all they do, clickety clackety all day. Nothing but blah blah blah. How broken is my English that I use every day, and I've been running it for 40 years. I still can't spit out a sentence that I want with clarity,
Right.
and say, let's go.
Actually, so that's interesting, is it starts all kinds of interesting questions about things that are subjective, and probably rightfully so as a humanity, that AI could start drawing lines on. Like, should I watch the output of that chat AI and see whether it uses an Oxford comma or not? You know what I'm
and then
saying?
go, this is what we're doing.
This is the norm, and it's not because we decided. Like, because even someone like the Associated Press can go, yeah, man, use it, and we're still we're like, nah, I don't think I'm going to use it.
And it still has the tendency to be based on a popularity contest, like what more people who use the internet in a certain fashion think. Right, so like if the input is like, and this is people's complaints about Facebook, like or Twitter or whatever, is like you go on it and you're like, it's being taken over by the extremes. I would like to own a gun, but I certainly don't want to go shooting up people, and I don't want to stockpile 18 million rounds, and I don't want to have a canteen basement. Right, like I just want to have, say, a weapon, but there's no place for me like on social media with that attire. It's either doomsday, don't touch my guns or I'll shoot you with them, or don't ever touch a gun, they're horrible and they kill all kinds of people. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And if AI is taking in just the worst of us,
Yeah.
or AI is just taking in the most extreme of us, or if AI is just taking in the most polarized, because all the middle of the road people aren't saying anything.
They stay out of it.
Because why would I want to get involved in this?
That's right.
That's going to bring some bias. That's going to bring an AI perspective that's a little warped based on the reality of normalcy in American or the worldwide life.
Because like the middle of the road people are actually going to the internet mostly for its output. They don't care about providing it input because they don't want to be. They feel like it's part of a wheel, right? Like you're trying to stereotype me just by having input, right? It amazes me actually that Ben does Google reviews. I'm completely taken aback by this.
Oh yeah, I do.
And like I would never even
How
consider.
many Google reviews do you do?
I've got quite a few. I'm of the top 10% coffee shop reviewers in the United States.
Have you Google reviewed more than 50 things in your life, Ben Foose?
Yeah,
What?
yeah,
Right? Drink that in, Hudson. Right? I didn't see that coming.
yeah.
So anyway, I would go look at a Google review, but if they say, "What do you think of the place?" I'm like, "That's none of your business."
Wait, with stars or with comments?
Oh, I very rarely with comments.
Oh,
probably
okay.
probably 10 comments.
Ask
over
him
time.
what very rarely means. I bet that means he's kept it to 2 paragraphs only.
No,
Half the time.
Every
2 paragraphs.
establishment gets 2 paragraphs. The other ones get 7.
no.
Do you ever input that in? Hey, what do I think is Scooter's coffee here? And then enter. And then a paragraph spits out. Just put that in.
That's a great
That's not
idea.
really you, Ben.
Well, so think about it. Like, as you guys were talking about kind of the inputs, you're talking about a censored Chinese population and a very spotty internet access Africa. So again, like the chat AI is only feed on what you can put in there. I tell you, who's really awesome at kicking out propaganda? Freaking Russia. Like those guys are on it all the time, kicking out stuff. And so it's just, I say all that to say it is, we are already in a time where truth is discussed as if it's subjective. The reality of it being subjective starts to or a popularity contest, but like not being tangibly true, but the whims of opinion shift what we represent as true. Like the ease of doing that in broad ways and in ways in which you're super careful that you can easily succumb to, like those days are upon us. It's the same risk that like, what did they just released a Temple of Doom or a Indiana Jones movie and they de-aged Harrison Ford. Did you guys see that?
No.
I haven't seen the previews for it, but I hear it's really well done, but also really creepy.
Right, because like the guy should be 80 and he looks like he's 48. And you're like, and so we can't, if you can't trust what you see and you can't trust what you're reading because you don't know where it came from, which is true already, but by volume you could go, look, man, 80% of people, like this is the top result. This is probably right. The ease of which things can shift and change a narrative will create interesting things if you're a person who believes things that are becoming harder and harder to believe in a society. And so this is where it comes back to how I think about like how we talk about things of faith and like I could even see, as you're talking about the notion of miracles, it wouldn't be a surprise to me to find, 5 years from now, or actually even places now where we're talking about it like we're talking about the Egyptian god Ra or something, right? They're like, oh, it's something that people believe, but was widely not believed. Okay, it doesn't mean make it not true, but our ability to then sort out what is true by its representation on the internet. Like you start losing, Snopes is going to go into overtime, like overdrive here. Like it's just something to have in the back of your mind, I suppose, and to just be aware of. I don't know, it's not all bad, but like it means here's actually at the run up what it means is that the things where we were always been concerned of which we think shallow relationships live and which the inability to have dinner table conversations with people have been very difficult in our internet age. It makes the local disciple-making, faithful living out of the trueness of Yahweh and the faithfulness and mercy of Jesus Christ and the reality of that in your life to be all the more evident on its local billboard, which is you. Because the landscape in that ether is going to be more and more shifty.
Yeah.
Shifting is probably maybe even the better word to say it.
Yes. Yeah. Boy, it couldn't be more true, right? Because like we've always said that like the best way for people to understand, know who Christ is like by how we love them, right? And there's a certain thing that knowledge can't replace, right? You can have a knowledge of all kinds of things, but like you can't replace how the presence of the Holy Spirit like makes you feel, right? And like empowers you in a way and like gives you a peace that like you've tried to attain with every search on the internet, even in our modern day without AI involved, right? People will scroll down 10 pages of Google until they find the answer they want and go, finally, I found a person that's just like me. Now we're good to go. Shallow community, I don't know them, they don't know me. Blank works on a page and we're going to go, I'm going to define myself by what this guy agrees to. And some of this is, once again, as one of the things we were talking about before the show, is like when we're trying to find out the root cause of why it seems to be an epidemic of anxiety and depression, and people like searching and searching and searching to not only find peace, and then they give up on it, and then just say, I don't really actually have to find peace. I just want to name the thing that's wrong with me, and then it will be better. And then they steam forward and go, at least I can put a name on this thing, and then I can find a way to, like, the way that the world is going to address this. And then it takes them another 10 years to go, actually, if I'm being honest with myself, that didn't help at all. I still feel crappy and not full of peace, and I don't know my creator, and I just feel a mess, and I don't know what I'm doing here, right? And like the progression of AI based on the polarization of the way the internet works right now, there's no way that gets any better in that front.
Yeah.
But it should all the more cause light to be very obvious.
It does. And I would also say that for a person that you're talking about right there, who is looking for truth, who is looking for meaning, who is looking for just kind of a way out of this mess they're in, whatever it is, if they're stressed, if they're anxious, if they're even suicidal here, and they go on the internet looking for some options, and there are real people who've written stuff, there's AI that's written stuff, and who even knows what's true or not, and they go looking for this truth, but the truth and the truth is ever shifting.
Yes.
Because there is no truth when you have AI doing what it's doing right now, and when you have people doing what they're doing right now, and when you have a warped reality, which is the foundation on which AI is doing this work, it's changing the meaning of truth. Ben, you mentioned earlier, like when you control the truth, when you can control the methods in which truth is revealed, it's a real problem in a lot of different ways. And again, we're trying not to go down to a conspiracy. It's just the nature of this thing called the internet, where you can find whatever truth you want on page 10 of the Google.
Yes.
You can, and when you are lost in this world, and I mean this in a very, very deep and meaningful way, when you are lost in this world online, searching for something, a something that you can't even find because the truth online is ever shifting because of the nature of the thing itself that is the internet.
Yep.
Right.
And that's why the rock becomes incredibly important.
That's
the
right.
rock that is.
And it stands out.
Yep.
Right? Like the fact that and people will call it archaic. They're like you're claimed to be worshiping a god that's like X thousands years old, and like none of his attitudes seem to change with the times. I'm like, how refreshing is that? Like if it was true when he said it, and it's still true now, doesn't that lend something to credibility?
Yeah.
Right? But now on the other hand, this is where it comes out of the conspiracy clouds, right? Because like the difference between a conspiracy is like that there's a bunch of mustache twisters behind this whole thing, like moving it and targeting it. And I think we can agree there's probably some.
Yeah.
But like I'd say 95% is just flat out ineptness. Like people are inherently believe themselves to be smarter than they are, or capable of handling something better than they are, and then once again your cows get out. Right?
Or like, I mean, just like there are limits to our human wisdom. 50 years ago, an anxious pregnant mother would have been recommended to smoke. Hey, calm your nerves down a little bit. Here's a couple Newports.
Put on this vest. Look cool.
Right?
No one's ever said that.
What happened, Hudson?
No.
We're on the same side.
It's so like, and I seem to recall, I'd have to go back and look for there was a show where we kind of talked about this, where like there was just core things that, like we believed as a society, and then like we learned more, and then we go, you know what? We should stop that. I'm a little bit worried about my. I need to change out the floor in my kitchen, and I had to take off a couple layers, but I had to leave the bottom layer because I had it tested, and the tile is made of asbestos, and so is the glue that's underneath it, and so like I can't put. There's a hardwood floor underneath. It looks nice, but I'm not going to stir it up. But like I went over to a family member's house for Christmas, and sure enough, they've got the same there's this asbestos tile in their house. Right, because there was a time in which we go, whiz bang, man, this is a great material, holds up, sturdy, put it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then I think, I was about to put luxury vinyl in my place.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's going to be 10 years, and we'll be like, well, crap, man, you shouldn't spray foam your house, and you shouldn't put LVT on your floors. But we all thought it was a really good idea. Like, that's not crazy. That's like super likely, because we got jazzed about it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, wisdom is taking in things and also calculating, like taking in all past failures and successes too, right? Wisdom is looking at the whole picture in a big macro view, right? And so anybody that says whatever we think right now is dead nuts on, right? The technology we think is going to finally save us, the whatever way of thinking, the way we're going to govern, the way that we should handle voting, whatever. Like take any scenario and go, we've got it licked. Like the only thing that I can point in my entire life that I know is unchanging and the same is God's like immeasurable love for me, and His scriptures that have proven true, and like His presence in my life. Everything else up for debate. Like it just feels like you cannot get a handle on it. As soon as you fix your car, it breaks down again. In some way, you had no idea how it was going to happen.
And we learned this in Bible songs in elementary school, like the foolish man built his house upon the sand, you know, and singing the song, and the wise man built his house upon the rock. I mean, this is stuff that is, if you grow up in the church, if you grew up churched at all, you probably know that song, at least in the Protestant church. It's a very, very popular kids song, right?
Yep.
And of course, it's based on what Jesus said. But my gosh, I can't even imagine not having a grounded reality, a grounded like foundation in something.
Right.
In this case, God being that fantastic foundation, but also just folks who are wandering around with an ever shifting like center of gravity.
Yeah.
How discombobulating, how disconcerting, and no wonder so many folks are just looking.
Yeah.
Looking for something.
And I think that's the truth about what we're saying about the input to AI. It's 95% people roaming around in the sand. There is 5% that think they're inventing better sand.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, still sand, right? That's the problem. The problem is it is still sand. Even
silicon micropellets.
That's right.
It's gonna be great.
It doesn't matter which way you've engineered it, which new polymer you found. It's still sand, and it still moves, and you still can't count on it. Because 10 years from now, you're going to be out of the game, friend. I was talking to a guy about like server technology, right? And like he was talking about some data farms, and he's like, usually data farms will change out all their servers like every 3 to 4 years. And I'm like, holy cow, how long has that been going on? They're like, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And I said, well, like when's the projected level out, right? Where they're like, the technology isn't increasing in such a wild way that like it makes cost benefit sense to wipe out your entire server racks every 3 to 4 years. And they go, it's not foreseeable that that's going to be the case.
There's a name for that.
Just the exponential growth curve of that. I mean, there is a name for it. I can't remember what it was, though.
Yeah.
But it was going to continue.
But in my mind, I think
growth.
it's like a curve that's got to level out, and I'm like, we're 20 years in. There's no way we can keep coming up with technological marvels that make it worth the whatever $10 million it probably costs to change a whole server floor out there. Like, oh yeah, it's cost effective and worth it.
Yeah.
Every 3 to 4 years. I'm like, mind-boggling.
Yeah. Get a terabyte on a Skittle, and then a
that's right.
terabyte on a grain of sand. It's just going to keep going.
Yep.
And then 100 terabytes. It's just going to keep going.
That's just crazy. You're listening to Live from the Path.
Yeah, so just to again, like if you're listening to this and you're like, hey man, I think them knuckleheads don't have any idea technology-wise what they're talking about. Let's ignore the fact of the undergirding. Like the key consideration here, right, is that either something that like an artificial intelligence is either going to mirror a fallible humanity in its whole, or require a curation by a fallible human. And either way, the volume of which, the ease of the creation of which, and the underlying biases and fallibilities in a humanity, this creates a risk on us, on people's ability to discern what is real, what is true, what is factual, and what is good. And that's the thing to be mindful of in conversations like this. I think that, like I said, I think the technology is pretty cool. I'm not a Luddite here. It's just like you have to have some sense of the risks that it creates beyond, hey, I think I can, when I saw an article that said, hey, we can skip AP English because this thing could just do it for you. And it's probably true, probably do a better job than you. But then the core question is like, what is the value in a human at all? Like, what do is that what we value in each other? Simply the ability to churn out information?
Yes. Because here's the thing, is like, Jesus says absolutely not, right? He spent no time speaking about your ability to churn out anything, right? And so like, it's funny that like all the values that inherent Yahweh would point us back to, all the things he instilled in his people and continues to instill through his Bible, right, are all the things that you cannot fulfill on the internet. Like you just can't do it. You can do a sense of community, you can't have actual community, right? Like you cannot have relationships that are deep and fulfilling and peaceful through the internet, because they could give or take you, and they could lie to you all the way there, right? Like relationships are built on like to get down in those deep crevices. They're hard, tough conversations sometimes, and people when they're ugly crying, or people when they've hurt you and then they've mended it again, and like you get to see once again the curated version of most people on the internet.
Well, I think that's not I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's true but like that it's possible to have community. It's just not super likely because like you run the same restriction if you're talking to somebody over the phone. Like they could choose not to pick up the phone. They could choose not to share certain things. It's saying that the only sense of which deep community can happen is if someone is sharing a breathing space with you. I think it is harder. I think it has the risks that you're mentioning.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so like to that end then is like, then what is the difference?
I guess the risk is much greater. The likelihood of deception increases exponentially
Yep.
when you're talking about a community in that way, and therefore the risk of betrayal. Now, we all know that face-to-face betrayals happen all the time.
Sure.
However, when you're at a face-to-face situation, there are stakes. There are stakes. Someone walks through the door of a church, someone walks through the door of an office. All of a sudden, the stakes are raised because your person itself is a part of this. It's not a screen name.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
even a voice on the end of now your humanity, your physical stature is there in that space. And the stakes raise, and therefore the likelihood of deception goes down. It is not eliminated, but greater
Yeah,
likelihood. In
But
what
you
you're
can also
describing.
there's feelings in rooms, right? Like you
Oh, yeah.
walked in a room where you feel like there's a bunch of tension in here, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you can't take that in
Yeah.
over even a video call, right? With all senses minus smell or something,
Yep.
right? Like you still can't quite take in like the feel of a room or people's body language as well as you could. If
Because
you were
every
there.
other medium is curated.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct.
Right, which is that's the big question I think of this century is going to be the nature of our curation of ourselves.
Mhm.
Like, what does it mean to compile how humanity represents itself, or the mirror of which technology shows it, and what do we do with it, and how do we represent ourselves? How much of it is true and real, and
Oh.
how much of it is a posturing for a humanity that probably doesn't even exist quite right?
Yeah, but just as a general statement, like that's an exhausting life.
Oh yeah.
Right? Any type of posturing is exhausting, right? So, like, even if you get the opportunity to curate, which we do, like, even on personal levels, we can curate how we are viewed on the internet or whatever. But let's take the internet out of it, right? Like, if I posture myself to be this type of person, every phone call I get, I have to act that way, which means I'm making it up as I go, right? It's not a genuine reflection of who I am. And, like, that's leading a double life in any way is completely exhausting. And you're right. It's more of a risk on the internet because the likelihood of you getting away with it is way more way more apt, right? And it's why we see people that it's sad, really, but the amount of people who are like YouTube influencers or Instagram influencers, and then if you were to go back and look at their body of work over the last 6 months to a year, you're like, these people are banging it, man. They got everything they need. They're so jazzed up. They're so happy, and then bam, they're in the news because they said, I don't want to live here anymore, and they're out. And you're like, how could this how could they get away with this, right? Not the fact that they lived a life that they thought, I'm just in a place that I can't get out of and I want gone. But the fact that you didn't have a close enough community that would have seen the signs before, right? That would have looked at something and said, holy cow, because the whole world was bamboozled.
Well, it's a rental community, Mike. That's what it is. And they're renting you for free.
Mhm.
That's what they're doing, like for TikTok influencers. And hey, if you're doing that and you're just working for you, fine, that's fine.
There's a good way to do it healthily, sure.
But ultimately, the world is renting you for free, and you're willing to rent yourself out. And I'm not trying to speak like about prostitution or anything. I'm not talking about that. But they're renting you. But once you are not interested anymore, once you are not entertaining anymore, they drop you like a fly. And that's what folks on the internet do. They drop you like immediately. And for someone who is in that situation of like the influencer, deep down you know that.
Yeah.
Because you've been on the other end of that, and you've seen other people doing that, and the moment they're uninteresting, the moment they say something, the moment they do something, I'm out, and you know this relationship is as shallow as it possibly can be with your followers.
Yeah.
And
I think that actually lends it to like what I think the bulk of like our societal issues are, and like internet withstanding, is like people have a genuine sense of wanting to be known. And like if you don't want to know them for who they are as a flat Stanley, then they'll become a whatever Stanley you want to know, right? And they will just continue to pursue people knowing them, even if it's not even you anymore, even if it's so curated that you couldn't keep it up.
Yeah.
That they just want to be, they want to feel like people know them, and so they'll change their identity. They'll change the way they live their life completely. They'll change the things that they say. Like they'll take infamy over just regular old being famous, just so that you would know me for some reason, right? And once again, like obviously you know where we're coming from on Life from the Path, right? Our identity is found in Christ. And so like that is not a conversation that we're struggling with on the daily, you know? And so like I think a lot of people's anxiety and depression and worry and all this stuff is all bound up in just their sense of just being known. And we can say, look, there is a creator who knows you and a community that wants you, and they're like, I will take any form of knowing except for that.
Mhm.
I don't want that. Because then if that community, and that's the view of most Christian community is like, God doesn't only want to know you, he wants to be all up in your business. He wants to be in your life. He wants to take some of the pitfalls that you're about to fall into or the devastation that you're about to cause others around you, and he wants to pull that back in and redeem it. And you want to be known differently than that. You want to be known by your own steam.
Yeah, agreed. All right, you've been listening to Live from the Path. I'm curious if if this has been on your mind, if you're thinking about any of this. Let us know if you found the conversation interesting or boring as crap. Just let us know. This is the Bob Eisenhower Live from the Path complaint line, 515-517-0085. Hey, Nolan, this is Ben who from the gas station earlier today. If you're listening, hit me a heads up. Just let me know you jumped on. Use that complaint line, 515-517-0085. Talk or text. We'd love to hear from you.
Brian, this is the vest man from the gas station.
It's Nolan.
Earlier. No, I'm talking to a different guy.
Okay, got it.
Different gas station guy.
Yeah.
The guy that hit me up with the free soda and the peace sign.
Yeah.
We're just two cool dudes, Brian. Just me and you, bro.
How'd that Dr. Pepper work out for you, by the way?
Delicious.
Good.
That what you got as a Dr. Pepper?
Yeah. Why?
Did I guess right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Pepper's the soda of all vest people everywhere.
I'm
You
not
got
surprised
the Dr.
by
Pepper
that.
colors on.
That's what I'm
Hey,
saying.
that doesn't make
Oh.
the statement that you think it makes, that Dr. Pepper.
What do you mean?
I mean, there's a certain essence of a Dr. Pepper combo with a vest that says, like, I don't know who I am. I need to put 31 flavors in so that I can bend like a Gumby to what
No.
other people say.
The
23
vest
it's
and
23 flavors.
and the Dr. Pepper combo says I can take on everything.
No, that's
not
what
bad.
it,
You're a
Baskin-Robbins.
one flavor man.
no, a ginger ale says that.
A ginger ale.
Yeah. It says I can fly peacefully without stomach troubles, and I can take names where necessary.
No, a ginger ale man plays with those toys inside the doctor's office that are meant for children, and he sits down Indian style right there, and then goes, vroom.
I'll have another Canada Dry, please.
My belly hurts me.
Yeah. Yeah, you ask why. That's the problem. That's what a Dr. Pepper man does, asks why. Okay, so the second thing, the core question, if I remember correctly, Mike, was like, can you follow Jesus and be an unpredictable wild man? Is that the gist of the question?
I mean, kind of, actually. I was just thinking about it that of all we talk about spiritual disciplines a lot, like spiritual disciplines of praying and reading your Bible and these things. And like, I think they're all good and healthy things. But it occurred to me, one, historically, like how we view reading our Bible and pray, like prayer time, right?
Yeah.
Like they just weren't available in cultures prior to ours, throughout history. So like if I wanted to just say, look, my prayer time is from whatever 5:30 to 6:30 in the morning. Like most people just had to go to work, and so they just got up and went. And same thing, like they didn't have access to the scriptures. And so they memorized it and they kept it in their heart and they sang worship tunes or whatever throughout the day. I don't know exactly what they did. I didn't live there. But what I'm saying is like it wasn't as available.
Yeah.
But if people were going to come to me and say, "Hey, I feel like I don't have a close relationship with God right now," these are the two main things I would say. Are you spending any time with God at all, and in what capacity? This is what I would recommend to you.
Yeah.
So, but on the flip side of that, I was thinking about like God has created like personalities and imprinted upon us in different ways. Like if we say that we're hands and feet and elbows and whatever, like there are some people that he created to be very fastidious.
Nope, vestigial tail. That's what you're saying. It doesn't
Nope.
make no sense.
Fastidious. What am I saying? The people that are regimented.
Studious.
Fastidious.
Fastidious.
Has a neat.
Yes. Neat and
Clean, tidy.
tidy
Talking
and
about tidy people.
organized.
Organized.
I
and
like
tidy
this
people.
word better.
Neat and
Okay.
tidy Joes.
Like their general bent is just to be more organized, right? Like they're good at planning and keeping schedules, and like they do this very well, and it doesn't seem to be a burden to them, and they're like, yeah, this is great. And then you meet other folks that like it's not sinful behavior, but they're just flighty. They seem a little bit lighter than everybody else. They just kind of dance from thing to thing, and they're not doing bad things, really. They're just, I don't know, they just don't get real bogged down with keeping tight schedules and
They're the
organizing.
Dharma of Dharma and Greg. They're the free spirit.
Exactly. They're a little free-spirited. And it occurred to me that, like, I think that, like, is there room within God's kingdom, like, for the free-spirited folks?
Yes.
Have I seen the free-spirited folks be excellent proclaimers of the gospel? Absolutely, I
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
People that live a life that I could have no chance of living. Like, they just have a certain thing about them that they see all cultural mores and worries, and they're not concerned with it in the least. They break them all, but there's a freedom to it that they seem to embrace. But they're almost always missing the Bible time they intended, or not sitting down nailing a 45-minute prayer right in the morning or whatever, And once again, don't hear me wrong. I love both these things. I wish my life actually reflected that more. I know people that do this, and I'm blown away by them. I think there's a change in their life because of it. But on the flip side, like, I got to think that God created an elbow, as part of hands and feet to be a little bit more free-spirited. Do they need to be concerned that they are not sitting in the kingdom of God where they need to be?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So is there room, or is it a way that we would change in which we counsel people? Like, is there a one-size-fits-all for, like, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from God? Well, how are you reading your Bible? How much are you praying? I think you should consider doing both of these, spending more time with God.
I think the risk of saying there's the one right way to do it, I think we trance into the danger zone of, like, legalism and whatnot. But also we kind of get into the area where, dutiful becomes the only way to Christ.
Yes.
And obviously there are things that must be done there. But I don't know. The John Eldredge book, Wild at Heart. When you were asking the question earlier, what are there wild men, wild women? Are there wild folks
Yes.
who are serving God? And of course the answer is yes. But in the book, I remember the very first chapter, it told the story of, like, an elder at a church who went on a sailing trip, and it was crazy because a big storm came. He almost died because the waves were crashing. But you know what? They all worked together. They pulled the boat into the harbor, and it was death-defying. And then he just looked at the person. He was like, it was the most fun I've ever had in my life. And then the question was, well, what do you, as a church elder, what are you supposed to be? What word describes what you need to be as a follower of God, as a man who's following God? And he thought about it. He was like, dutiful. And that's the word he came up with. It ain't bad to be dutiful.
Right.
But there's got to be better words to describe the relationship with God and Jesus than just dutiful.
Yeah.
Because we look throughout the Bible, and the question is, like, name some fellows in the Bible who, yeah, obviously they're serving God, but 100% of their life is not dutiful.
Yeah. They're kind of wild.
They're kind of wild.
They kind of cut their own trail on this thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And
So, and maybe there's not I'm not looking for, like, the top 10 things you could be as a Christian, right? But what I'm looking for is maybe to try to, because there's dangers on the complete wildness, right? Like, most of the stuff that we run into, like, especially people that tend to believe that they are driven solely by the power of the Holy Spirit, no grounding in Scripture, no grounding in outside teaching. They just cut a trail, do whatever they want.
Yep.
They're the ones that tend to take the Lord's name in vain. We'll put it that way. They tend to attach God's name to something that they wanted to do, right? And then they basically paint.
they reverse engineer Christianity to suit
Yes,
their own life.
Yes, to look more like them, right?
Yes.
And so, like, there is a legit danger in that. And so, like, there can't be a recommendation that says, look, the Bible's not a big deal. The Bible's always been a big deal, right? It was a big deal in the first century, and so we're just saying that our access to it on the daily could be something that we could talk about, to not wake up every morning and then you're running late for work and get tailing it out of there and you're like, I did not get my 20 minutes of Bible reading in. I feel separated from God. It doesn't come that easy. Your separation from God doesn't come from you missing one 20-minute Bible reading time.
Yeah. So some considerations here. God speaking is a big deal. That's true.
Yes.
And I think the word faithfulness hits me a lot better than dutiful, because faithfulness doesn't prescribe implicitly the means of which God calls you to be faithful to what He's asking. It means that when He speaks, you move, you react, and that doesn't necessarily bind you in the same ways of a human understanding of duty does. Duty sounds regimented.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, a couple things that were coming to mind is if we think about, hey, studious Bible reading in the morning at 5:30. Two things that are true that I know of is that, one, in Jesus' day, it's not like anybody owned their own scriptures. Like, they didn't have it. They could not get up at 5:30, unroll the scroll, and start taking a read for multiple reasons. One, they didn't have it. Two, it wasn't sunny out. Three, they didn't have alarm clocks. A private notion of time is a relatively new thing. Even like a clear notion of time is relatively new. This is why we harass some of the quirks in the biblical record, where we're like, even the hour of Jesus' crucifixion, we're like, how could they be off? It was like, because no one had a watch, man.
Yeah, ninth hour, 11th hour.
They're just like peeking up at the sun. And it was, if you remember, when Jesus was crucified, it was cloudy. They don't know what time it is. And so you first start to see this regimented by the church with a bell. So they start ringing at the time. Someone's keeping track of a time, got a sundial somewhere, trying to give you a rough estimate of when it is. The notion of a personal time, of which I'm going to wake up before the sun and do a specific thing, that's a modern thing. That's a really modern thing to do. And so we can't look at the last 1,800 years of post-Jesus Christianity and go, boy, we should just, every one of them failed because they weren't up, at 5:30 in the morning reading the scriptures. Now, I will tell you that, traditionally, people focused, and absent of those things, they focused more on memorizing scripture because they would learn it, they would hear it, they would talk about it, they would sing it. The notion of an outside of the scriptures song, it certainly existed, poetry too, but predominantly they sang the Psalms. They sang things that were otherwise things that Jesus said or something that the Bible did. And so there was more of that, but we just got to be careful of deeming behavior that is probably good for us as being the holy thing, and that if you don't do it, God is somehow angry. Because I'm certain that there are situations of which you can't, you couldn't, if you went and followed God faithfully, you couldn't possibly keep up with your daily Bible reading. You couldn't. It wasn't going to happen because you're out doing the thing that God has asked you to do. And it's almost the balance is so difficult here because, Mike, to your point, we're not trying to say, I think we want to protect that God speaking is valuable. And so do I want to hear God speak? Yes, I do. Did he speak a Bible into existence? Yes, he did. If I have it available to me, why the heck would I not want to take it in as often as possible if the Lord is speaking through it? I should want to, but it's not a time clock. It's not your job, in and out, to go read scripture or the boss will be mad. It's really, if God is speaking, don't you want in on it? And if you've got not to feel an unnecessary guilt upon those types of things, if God is otherwise using you in some other way, that we don't create an arbitrary barrier that doesn't exist between you and God. That would be my fear here.
Yeah, and maybe some of this is you or us trying to fit God more in our schedule, right? So if I can nail out my Bible reading in the morning, maybe I won't feel so separate as I go throughout my day and pretty much move him to the back and not include him in most of the day, and so I don't know. I know I would still, I think you're right. Spending, we use the metaphor a lot that says, look, how do you build relationships with anybody, right? You spend time with them. And so spending time with God is how you build that relationship. Yep. Now, maybe that, I would probably say it's not best practice to have him be the second fiddle in whatever you're doing all the time.
I think that's let me take that, because I think that is one of the key things, the questions you'd have to answer, which is there something unique about our times that make this kind of structure more relevant than perhaps it would have been 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 800 years ago? And the sheer busyness of our lives, the ability to even think of our time in blocks of schedules, and the kind of notorious scheduling of that time. Again, the United States version of on time is different than, say, France's version of on time for lunch. Right? It's just different. And Mexico even, we're the same continent, and we're a lot stricter on time when it comes to these types of things. And so our notions then say, well, if I'm planning a day like this, am I being intentional about making sure that I've created the space to put God at the forefront? That isn't as necessary if your life is simpler. If your life was basically, I get up when the sun rises, I go farm my land for the value of my family and for some meager trades at the thing, and then I come home, you're not having to be so intentional about scheduling it in because the notion of your schedule isn't the same. And so it's taking a modern problem and saying, how does Jesus honored within it? And I think that does make sense to think of it that way. Now, I think God might be after our busyness, like the sheer need of some of this thing, and the thought of squeezing in. Like, I think that's a risk to us anyway. But, like, I think it is an attempt to say, based upon what our cultural norms are, what do I need to do to make sure that Jesus is rightly honored within them?
Well, when we talk about like what people have been doing historically, I mean, you all make a fantastic point. 800 years ago, nobody has any papers. Nobody has any papers. Like, we have the luxury of having so many papers, not just Bible papers. We have books that people have written about the Bible, and then books that people have written about books, which people have written about the Bible. Like, we have access to so much. There's two things I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't think we should be in a place where we're feeling some sort of historical guilt because we have more access to stuff, but we're not using it more than because we have it. Oh, we feel bad because people in 800 AD, they didn't have it at all. I don't think we should be feeling bad about
Agreed.
that. The fact that we're not living up to our full potential of what we could have access to because we have so much access. I don't think we should do that. But number two, I think people who did live a long time ago, before they had the papers, they were regimented as well. Like the stuff you described. What did we do 1,200 years ago? People got up when the sun rose, and then they milk their cow. Do they do a prayer? They might do a prayer. They might not do a prayer.
Yeah.
And they do all the business they have to do because 99% of people had no money back then. So they do all those things that they had to do.
Yep.
And then Sunday, that's when they get to see the papers. And even they don't get to see the papers. They just see the priest or the preacher, whoever it is, and wherever they are, Eastern Orthodox Church, Catholic Church. There are no Protestants 1,200 years ago, but they're still regimented in a way that works for the time that they're living in.
Yeah.
Now, us today, we have a lot of peripheral regimental stuff. Peripheral, busy, regimented stuff. Like, we got soccer practice, we got this. These are all peripheral things.
Yep.
But the quantifiable time that we're spending with Jesus, I want to talk about that for a moment.
Yep.
Because you can easily add it up. It depends if you're a quantified guy or a qualified guy. I'm very much a qualified guy because any sort of just going through the motions, there have been a lot of songs about going through the motions, right?
Yep.
Going through the motions, I don't know if that does much. I'd rather have 5 minutes of really, really deep, meaningful time than 30 minutes of dutiful time.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel. I imagine you guys feel kind of similarly, right?
Yep.
So I guess when it just comes down to it, if the original question that you had mentioned at the very beginning was... wait, what was the question at the beginning? I want to.
Can you be a wild man?
Yeah.
Can you be a wild man? The answer, of course, is yes.
Yeah.
Because I think the quality of the time that you're spending is the key part of what we're talking about. Because 1,200 years ago, 1,800 years ago, I mean, what if Timothy, in like 59 AD or whenever, he leaves town and he leaves one of the letters from Paul behind? What's he going to do? He might go back and get it, but for those couple days when he doesn't have it, what's he doing? You know what? He's still spending quality time with God. You know what he's doing? He's still preaching. He's living his life grounded in the rock of God, grounded in the rock of Jesus, and the actions that he are taking, even if they're not like quiet time actions, those actions that he is taking are centered around God, and therefore, they can't be quantified. Oh, he spent this much time giving to charity, this much time preaching to other people. Like, yeah, you could quantify him, but the fact that Timothy is living his life focused 100%, and every word he speaks has God at the center. Every action that he takes has God at the center. Even if it's the action of going to the market and buying fruit. You know what? When he's walking down that street, he's walking down the street in a place that has God as its center, even if he's not thinking about it at the exact moment, because that's his life.
So if you feel like the output is not that,
Yep.
right? If you feeling like your output is not the Timothy output, we still find the two things, the Bible reading and the prayer, to be an excellent place to recenter
totally.
those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you have to do that, though.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
That's right. It just moves the barometer to say it is more about the integration in your life as opposed to thinking of those things as an input. Like
And checklists.
that's right. That's right. It's not because like I have run into people who like start to feel super guilty where like, hey, I missed my daily Bible. In fact, I don't know, I've started this a million times. Like I'm gonna read my Bible every day, and it probably takes me 2 weeks, and then I've lost it. And then I feel bad. I feel guilty, and I somewhat feel like, oh, I let God down, and I'm now separated from in that relationship. But like I'm not. Like I made that up because I drew a boundary and then I didn't succeed in it. And the risk then is that now my actual relationship, the reality of that relationship with God, like feels off simply because I created a false boundary of which to measure whether it's off.
Ben, can we explore that for just 1 second?
Yes.
So you read the Bible for 2 weeks.
Yep.
All right. And then 2 weeks and 1 day you stop reading the Bible.
Yep.
How has your life changed in that particular day?
In reality, it did not.
Exactly. You're walking around. Are you doing stuff different because you didn't read the Bible that day? Now, I'm not fiercely advocating that we should avoid Bible reading. That is not at all what I'm saying.
Right.
But the reality might have changed based on those boundaries that you created for yourself. But in the end, on day 15, right? If anything, I think your guilt is going to be a hindrance. And because
I think
That's
that's
right.
the
and I think
problem.
that's
right.
concerning.
And see, but I just the other side of the seesaw here. Like I know people that like the guilt doesn't show up if they miss their time with God, whether it be Bible reading or just sitting around worship and praying. Like they don't feel guilty. They're like, I miss my time with God. Like
Yes.
I want that. That's what I want.
That's right.
Right. And so like if that's your reaction, yes, this is exactly where we want to be.
Yeah,
I
right.
think when we start talking, he just doesn't deal in guilt. It's not a rebuke tool that God uses. If you read the entirety of the Bible, he does discipline his sons and daughters for sure, but not with guilt ever. That's just not the way he operates.
I suppose it depends on how you define guilt. I do believe like a lot of the things that we would otherwise attribute to our conscience, things that stick with you are God saying, I'm not going to leave you here with like letting you know that there is a separation here, if there was one.
Yeah.
But like that's a situation in which I don't think there is one. Because God isn't arbitrarily trying to find you because you didn't read your scriptures that day. But if you're living a life of integrity where like the notion of what you believe, understand, know to be true is integrated full in your life, when you start living outside of that, you are going to feel it. And like oftentimes I think we misapply guilt as a bad thing to say, oh, like I've been made to feel guilty of this. Well, what's the difference between feeling guilty about it and bringing something to your attention? And would I want to do something that walks outside of what God wants for me, and then have him not bring it up, have the Holy Spirit not lay a burden on your heart that goes, hey man, you're walking away.
Yeah, and you're right. Like the call to repentance, like you could label that as being made to feel guilty, but the truth is you are guilty, right? You're not being made to feel guilty. You are guilty, right? And it's a presentation of fact.
Yes. Yeah, and I do think, and this is where we got to be careful, is that I feel like God does certainly use that. That's the notion of a helper. Like if you're off course, you should know that. You should feel it. God wouldn't leave you in it. I don't think humans actually can handle this. I think humans can't handle judgment. They can't handle guilt. I think it's not good for us as humans to try to enforce those types of things. I think we're not trustworthy in it, and it creates a superiority and a lack of humility. I think it's not valuable. And so I would say that like it is not a human's job to create, enforce, and twist guilt onto people, just like you're not qualified for an ultimate judgment in someone's righteousness in their relationship with God. But I do think what we often attribute to as guilt, like I was thinking about this, maybe this example I think we've used in the past, but when I basically got the vibe that like downloading music off of the internet without paying for it was wrong, I felt guilty about that. But I didn't feel I felt guilty about it because it was wrong.
Yeah.
And what would I expect God to do is to be presented with something that is hindering my witness, that is creating something in me that's bad, and have him. What does it look like for God to make sure I know that? Well, it looks like what we would often attribute as guilt. But the thing is that in the presence of guilt, like it goes back to the thing we were talking about. I think was it last week or a couple weeks ago, where like there can be a lament for having fallen short, like in the presence of sin, but your right reaction is repentance and acceptance of grace. And so the notion of like that guilt shouldn't nag. It doesn't live. It basically is the bridge between, hey, you're missing it, and you going, shoot, let me turn around from it, and God going, right on. And like that's it.
Yeah.
And so like we shouldn't be carrying on like hours, days, weeks, eons of guilt. I don't think that's godly unless we're refusing to repent from it.
Yeah. So what I think we're recommending, and where I feel like at peace with some of the things we're talking about, is like, you as a forgiven son and daughter, you should seek time with God. You just should be looking for it. And maybe it doesn't look at 5:30 every morning, and maybe you don't keep a detailed diary. But the other side of that is not like you live completely in the wilds with no contact with God, because like your output's not going to be what you're intending it to be.
Yeah.
And so like even Jesus, who's not keeping a detailed diary or a schedule of prayer, that man will sneak out to pray. Right? He will find a way to
Climb
connect.
a mountain.
That's right. He will do whatever was necessary for him to be able to reconnect with the Father. And so, and maybe that just falls in line with the opening gambit, which was God created elbows and knees and knuckles. And maybe you're one of those, but whatever God created you, in whatever way he created you to worship him, you should be doing that. Mm-hmm. And you should, it doesn't have to compare to your neighbor, but it does have to equal you spending time with God in whatever way that looks like. And I think it does, like whether it's regimented or not, I think it does equal solitude with him at some point. I do think it means spending time with him, right? That's how you build all of your very personal and deep relationships in your life, is with solitude with them, spending time with just that person. And so like there's no reason that would not apply back to spending time with God.
No doubt. I think there's two things to consider. One, the point about guilt. I've never seen evangelism based on guilt ever work.
Right.
Like, now, folks in history thought it worked great. Like, whether it be the Puritans, we're just going to guilt you into believing. But usually people would start, quote, believing because of, like, almost social, like, reasons. As in, you'll be ostracized, etc. But when Roger Williams formed the colony of Rhode Island based on kind of separating church and state, as in the authorities in charge of the state should not be the church authorities, because then what you get is this kind of idea of forced religion, which Roger Williams says, forced religion stinks in God's nostrils. That's Roger Williams' famous quote.
I think that's right.
I think it's a great quote.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant, brilliant quote. Like, just like forced charity is not charity.
Yeah, right.
Forced religion is not religion. And so this idea that we're guilting somebody in, that's no good. But the second point being, like, Mike, what you're saying about solitude. I mean, this has got to look differently for so many different people.
I agree.
People who got a journal, people who do it at 5:30 a.m., people who do it at 5:30 p.m. And I think for the longest time, American Christianity specifically really wanted to put people like in a box, just in a really, really, really tightly wound box in all sorts of different denominations. And God is bigger than that box. God is way bigger than that box. Yep. God is way bigger than the Christianity that was created specifically within the United States, because these branches of Christianity were created by men.
Yeah.
And men and women, and they are fallible.
Yeah. Which is why we're talking about like getting away from like checkboxing a religion, right? Like you feel like you are saying, hey, I don't have to live within your box, right? And sometimes our output of that is like, yeah, I don't journal at 5:30, whatever. Don't judge me. Like all the while, you're basically being offered like living water. And you're like, you're not going to tell me how to take it. I'll take it whenever I want. And then your rebellious response is, I won't actually come get it. Like, I won't ever go to the living water because it doesn't fit the box you created for me to get it. And so, like, that's the mistaken output. It's like, yeah, right now, like, consider this done. You are free from religion, right? But if you're passing up the living water as part of your rebellion from religion, you're an idiot. Like, you're an absolute fool. You don't understand the living water. Yeah. If you're not seeking to meet with God in any way, you're not giving the finger to religion. You're causing yourself not to have living water. That's dumb. Yeah. That's not a good way of thinking.
Yeah, and I will say that I think the existence of this box, of this, like, this is what a good Christian does, and the indications of which are lazy ways of which we've created to assess a spiritual maturity. It's like, oh, if you're behaving in this way, then we know you're good. If you're not doing this or you struggle with it, then we know that you need help. It's a lazy way of going about it. And frankly, back to the point of both guilt and judgment, is it puts humans in the wrong spot. It puts us in the position to have to go, oh, it's my job to assess whether someone is in good standing with the Lord or not, and I'm going to do it by kind of these arbitrary behaviors that we've set out, things that maybe are good for you, but might not necessarily be like the same way that God uses somebody else. And I get, because what this feels like is a super risk. It's the same reason we have the problem of embracing the work of the Holy Spirit, especially in kind of some of our mainline denominations, is we're like, yeah, but if you leave it up to the Spirit's discretion, like they could totally misuse it. They could blame the Holy Spirit and say that this is for God when it's totally not. If we all agree on the Scripture, then okay, then we don't have any problem. But like that's actually both. It's a both and. That's how you assess whether something is actually of the Spirit, like the Spirit or not, or of God or not. As you look at the Bible and go, okay, is this acting consistently with God's character? If it elevates, and we gave you, remember this a few shows ago, we gave you a broad trajectory of heresy. If it elevates people, probably heresy. If it elevates God, you're probably better. Like that's your rough go on it.
And people have used the Bible for the same, like in the same foul
Oh,
way.
totally.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So like there's nothing holy. Like we're just talking about understanding the character of God and saying, yes, I want to spend time with him. He's everything. I want to have time with him. And like it doesn't have to look a certain way, but it does have to happen. Like there's no caveat to get out of that.
Yeah.
You do need to be spending time with God. You should want to. Your heart should yearn for it, right? And like I don't know what that looks like for you exactly, and I probably would try to not swim in guilt waters all the time. But if you need some basics, there's no reason not to head to that scripture.
Right.
There's no reason not to set apart a prayer time. I think all these things are great, but we're just talking about like not checkboxing it, right? Like not putting it in such this rigid thing, and also not using that thing as an excuse not to do any of it. Right? That's not going to work.
And also not using the fact that you're not in a box as an excuse to not do anything.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's more the output I see.
Mhm.
Like that's the thing is when you put humanity into this thing, we're saying, look, you're not tied into a specific religion or specific way of worshiping God. People are like, great, I'm free, and then they just don't.
Jack.
They don't do it at all, and they're like, God is not moving in my life. I'm like, you spend no time with God, and then you're mad at him? That seems wrong.
Now, here's what's interesting is like in that situation, I would prescribe that the person, even if you're reading your Bible every day, that's in and of itself a facade. Like on the opposite end, if you look at a relationship with God and you say what you guys are prescribing or describing is like seems dangerous and not boxed in and unwieldy, then I feel like you understand the potential work of the Lord in His humanity correctly. Like that's right. That's how it should feel. It shouldn't feel like your human program. It shouldn't feel like like an army. It should feel like the Holy Spirit is the wild friend.
Yes.
Like he could be, if it's integrated in your life. You should like at any moment in time you say God could speak and me listening could totally turn up the world. It could put this rooster upside down. And if you do not anticipate that very thing, then you are misunderstanding what God is up to and capable of in this world. If like his only notion of faithfulness is whether you said, yes, but I read the scriptures today. I actually think if you read the scriptures well, you'll go out and start doing some wild stuff on your own. Like because God spoke there too. Like the very notion of his forgiveness is crazy. The notion of the how you forgive the world around you is nuts. Loving your enemy is nuts. Like these are all crazy behaviors, human to human, that the Bible prescribes because God spoke there. And so there just gets to be a hesitancy in the more conservative circles where we're like, if you take away some of these things in these boxes, then people become unpredictable. And like that is probably a right understanding of the God that you're serving. Not capricious, but unpredictable. You don't know in which way he will use somebody and how it will be used to otherwise draw people to him. I think you should be open to wildness.
I like that phrase. Not capricious, but unpredictable.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
Okay.
really good.
You ready?
Yeah, let's go. Let's give it some advice.
Dear Life from the Path, my husband and I were raised within religious communities. Among other conservative values, we were taught that a wife is to be responsible for domestic labor and a husband is to be the primary breadwinner outside the home. Yes, even in the 90s and 2000s. We were still deeply involved in these communities when we married at 21 and 22. I wasn't physically attracted to my husband at the time of our courtship or marriage, but he was and still is very kind to me. I was led to believe I was following God's path by getting married, and the union allowed me to escape my domineering father. The initial relief and freedom I experienced slowly evolved into feelings of resentment when I started realizing my husband is not equipped, emotionally or intellectually, to provide for the family I hope for. Luckily, we have agreed that many of our family's traditional values are simply not serving our needs. I now enjoy a career and provide the majority of our income. I'm still responsible for most of the housework, despite many conversations about balancing the labor. My husband recognizes that he needs to step up, but has struggled to follow through. Men doing housework was not modeled for him growing up, which makes it challenging. His heart is in the right place, but that doesn't help me. I feel burned out and alone. We have been in the marriage counseling for a year. Nothing has changed. I'm turning 30 this year and starting to despair about the future of our marriage and possibility of having children. I want a partner I can count on. Am I chasing a fantasy? There's a lot in there.
That's quite the essay.
Yeah. So,
Was it written by an actual person?
Could be.
Could be AI.
this, I'm taking it in weird, I guess. She explained that they came from a rigid background,
Yes.
which probably guided the part of which she made a decision to this man.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of wonder, is it possible that she's blaming that on, like, that's the only way to get away from what'd she say, an overbearing father?
Yes.
Because she was expected to not take care of herself. Like, she had to be married. Is that kind of the vibe I'm getting?
I don't know.
Well, but in either case, it started off that way, but they seem to be in open communication. The man seems to agree that these beliefs are archaic at best, and should otherwise be amended to reflect goodness in the Lord and current societal norms. And then they've pursued that very thing. In that transition, she has found success in her career. He is kind-hearted and cares for her, but like is not good at the things traditionally that his original viewpoint would have absented him from, like things he would normally have to do anyway, or wasn't required to be good, nor has he ever seen modeled. And so he's struggling with that. This all sounds right to me. That's exactly how you would expect it to happen.
Yeah, that nothing seems surprising. You know, I like to focus on the good stuff at first, because what I hear is we have a woman with a successful career. That's great for the family.
Yep.
Sure.
All right. Just as important, maybe not just important, but also important, the husband appears to be supportive of that and says, hey, this is great for the family.
Yeah.
It's different. It's unique. It's not what was modeled for him growing up based on the story. So right there, that's an enormous win, I guess, again, based on someone who grew up in a very, very certain worldview, right?
Yep.
The words that offered me the most encouragement, his heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
Like that phrase, if it's a genuine phrase, then my gosh, there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. I'm a little befuddled here, in that they've been married for 9 years. Did it say 9 years? Yeah, 9 years. And she's worried about the future marriage and having kids. But she's also says we're having a hard time sharing the home duties. And I can't for the life of me think what home duties are consisting between two people. Right? Like, you don't currently have kids. What are you doing at your place that's causing so much work to have to be done?
When we before we had kids, we went through one trash bag a week.
One trash bag a week?
One trash bag a week, and it was amazing.
You could clean the whole house in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's if you wanted to get the vacuum out.
Yeah.
And you really didn't need to. You could ignore it if you wanted to for another week. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, I'm blown away about the amount of housework that is necessary for this household to run.
I went out to buy food for somebody today, like a single person, and I don't know how I ended up by myself, but like, I mean, I had to put up a whole bunch of crap. I'm used to buying for a family of 6, and so like I got 2 giant jars of something. I'm like, there's no way they're never gonna go through any of this stuff. So I mean, like, it was a real weird circumstance of what I actually walked out of there with.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have gone to Costco, man.
Yeah. So once again, I'm slightly confused. Some of this story's not quite adding up.
Yeah.
Like, but if the room is taking this thing in right, like, look at it from her perspective. What is she actually worried about?
Well, it's not happening fast enough. So like they've shifted some of what you might think of as burdens, the burden of the bulk of the money coming in. It sounds like the burden of the housework. And so she feels like I switched and took over the part that he was otherwise doing, the place where he could be helping out in the housework, he didn't actually pick up. And so what it feels like is that her burden became double and his burden became like an eighth.
Yeah.
That's what she's feeling. And that's probably right. Like, you're probably feeling that correctly. My caution here would be, and I don't know how quickly all this stuff kind of moved in your marriage. Like, how soon did you figure out that this wasn't working? But it is very difficult for someone to model behavior where they really have no idea. So think of this man's perspective. His dad didn't act the way that you're expecting to act. His core religious belief through his whole life up until marriage didn't otherwise reflect this. even though you've both agreed that things should be different, the primary person giving you instructions on what you need to act like is your wife, who's also the person on the other side of how you're going to behave. And so, like, I was talking to somebody else over the holidays, and we were talking about people and kind of evil people's whether they're evil people. And one thing I said is that, like, the more people I talked to, the more kind of pastoral situations I've been in, like counseling type of stuff, everything's gray. Everything's gray. People are gray. Even the most evil person you can think of, if you look back, like, first, you check me. Do they have a dad around? What kind of behavior would model for them? What was considered acceptable and okay when they were growing up?
What kind of trauma showed up in their upbringing?
That's right. And, like, it's not it's not that they're not responsible for their behavior, but, like, there are ways to explain it, and how difficult or easy it is for them to otherwise abide by good notions of behavior do vary by person. Like, it doesn't change the standard, but it may not be super easy. And so, like, this guy seems, by your indication, like he's trying. He's just not succeeding. I don't know if this particular marriage counselor stinks. You know, one of the questions I would ask is who he's hanging around with. Like, is he hanging around? Like, are you still going to the same church community where, like, he's the wild left winger? Like, you're trying to bring this into the 19th century, and and everybody's against it. So, like, his community, I would be interested in, and maybe an encouragement to him to be around the right types of people who share similar values, but also hold to I presume what he still believes religiously. And for you, like, it just feels a bit early to cut the rope.
Agreed. It's too early.
Yeah.
And I would just say to the gentleman here in this relationship, I mean, Mike, what you said earlier, like, how much work could this possibly be? So let's make it really, really simple. All right. I know you know how to use a vacuum.
Yes.
Oh, you have hardwood. I know you know how to use a Swiffer, both dry and wet. If the wet Swiffer seems a little tough for you, there's plenty of online tutorials for you.
Sure.
I know that dishes are maybe unpleasant, especially considering your background, but start with putting away the clean ones, and then let's slowly get around to the dirty ones. And then finally, for the big one, laundry.
Do it.
All right. To the wife in this relationship, do your husband a solid and do just one thing. Buy 3 baskets. Have him buy 3 baskets. And the one basket is whites, the other basket is colors, and the third basket is untouchables. Husband, do not touch this.
Those are for you.
Don't do anything with it. The whites, put them in cold water. The colors, put them in cold water. Dry, easy. It'll take care of 90% of the laundry.
Yep.
Just never touch this basket.
Yeah.
And then that's 90% of the housework. You got to do it, dude.
Actually, this dude he's classic because he's being stereotyped a little bit here, but, like, this is a classic dude problem, right? And it's not near as much about doing housework at the house as your wife feeling known by you, and I say that in a way because, like, if you can take in that she is working a full-time job and she comes home to work a second full-time job in her estimation of all the things that need to get done, then if you know that and you know that about her, you will innately start to find ways to take some of that burden off her. You will find ways in your schedule to begin to make that. And now you're doing 2 things, right? You're knowing your wife well, right? She's not just a partner in this thing of getting the house clean, right? She is part of it's the woman that you are attached to, right? Spiritually and physically. Like, this is the gal. And you don't know her enough, and she starts feeling resentment about that. You know, she starts feeling that you're kind of taking advantage of her a little bit in all the things that she's doing, and you seem to not be worried about this at all. Now, if I was going to turn around and focus on the gal, like, there's one phrase that you use that, like, I don't know, it really sticks with me because I don't know that many people that can say this about their spouse. But, like you said, he was and still is very kind to me, right? Is that the first thing that comes out of a spouse's mouth? Like, when you talk to people at work and they describe their spouse, like, I don't know that I've heard someone describe and say, yeah, my husband, he's just very kind to me.
Right.
He's very good to me.
It's quite
you
the
know,
phrase.
and, like, very few people actually get to say that about their spouse. And so, like, some of these, I'm saying this without trying to sound overbearing, but you have a thing built up in your head that I kind of feel like no man would be able to make. Like, you've been reading a slew of romance novels, and then you look at this stubby doofus that you married, and you're like, why couldn't he be more this, right? He was never going to be more that, right? And then that looks like that, or that treats this like that, or like some kind of cavalier, awesome dude, he ain't going to do laundry either, right? And so, like, you're taking all these characteristics of, like, this perfect man that doesn't actually exist. So your little bit grass is greener here, All right, and I think I feel bad for your religious upbringing, and maybe you got in a marriage that you weren't totally prepared for. But like to take some of the weight off that, so did everybody I know. Everybody I know got into a marriage, and the first year was just rocky mess. A little bit of rocky mess.
Just
No one
figuring
knows how to coexist with another person, right? And so, like, there's always going to be push and pull and struggle. So, like, the biggest advice I could give is, one, like, you need to temper your expectations. Like, you just make sure that they're in reality, right? That you don't think that your husband, of all the possibilities he could be, because that man doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And then for the dude, you need to know your wife, and like you need to know her. Like you need to sit down and write down some questions and say, I would like to know more about you. Here's the things that I would like to know, right? And then start putting some of these things into action.
Yeah, and I might suggest too that especially coming from the situation that you've come from, you are probably going to miss the mark, to overshoot it. Like when you come from something that feels repressive, you do run the risk of like baby bathwater problems where like you overrun some things. And so I just would advise caution that like similar to the conversation we were having earlier about like humans' ability to on sand is like where you're at today may not be the mature, wise place that you're going to be at 3 years from now. And so be cautious making decisions. We spent a long time talking about this, making big decisions on a narrow focus. And so just be careful about that, because like that was the core complaint, was that the guy came from a repressive background, but then he let that go, but he's still ugly. That seems like the core problem. He not a looker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean I get it. You want to be you want to like to look at the person that you're stuck with.
Everybody wants to marry a Clooney, man.
Yeah.
There ain't that many of them. There's
No.
like one.
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, I mean just just give it some time. But you're right. Like I think the guy's gonna have to get to know his wife better, and she needs to be able to still feel valued. Here's the problem: is that the shifting of what feels like kind of the burden of a lady working like that. Like I don't know if I believe, I'm gonna be cautious how I say this, but like I think men are often wired to feel that, and like they don't require as much of the "I want you to know me." They still do, but like they feel accomplished for that type of provision. And women doing that type of work, like their need to otherwise be known and understood and appreciated by their husband, like it's not as innate. They actually still very much value their husband's feedback over just the innate contribution that they made to the family.
Yeah.
Where guys often tend to be like, frankly, this is how I'll give you how it expresses it poorly. This is where guys go. They come home and they sit on their brains. And they do the 2-cheek sleep because they're like, hey man, I was out and I did my job. I brought home money and I don't really do anything at the house when I get home. Like that's bogus. But like that's the negative way of which this type of thought process is reflected. But it also means that guys can often sustain themselves off just knowing that they're contributing for a longer amount of time. Now they still need it. They still need to be shown appreciation and for someone to recognize that they're doing that. But like I do think it's a little bit more innate. And so
do you notice she didn't say like he's lazy, he plays video games all day, he's a slob, right? Like none of the common bum husband crap that you would normally expect. I feel like he's getting a little bit of a bum shake. That's what I feel like.
Nonetheless, I still think he needs to step up, at least in a minimal sense.
Absolutely,
because there are things to be done to make this relationship be better.
Yeah. Here's the thing: people are always going to out handsome you, friend, but they ain't going to outwork you, right?
Yep.
This is true of just about everything in life. There's always a better looking, stronger, faster, better jumper, better eyebrows, whatever. There's always a better version of you out there somewhere. But I'll be hot dang, they ain't going to outwork me. Right? I'll make sure I get this done.
Or outbest you.
Outbest me.
To quote, well, shoot, I don't remember who said it, but if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, don't make a pretty woman your life. From my personal point of view, get an ugly girl to marry you.
It's absolutely true. Same should be true for dudes.
Yep.
Okay, ready? The question was, am I chasing a fantasy? Secular says, I'm sorry to say this, but I'm afraid you may be. While you've escaped it, your husband is still trapped in the role he was raised to believe was his. The question really is, can he recognize this and adapt to new circumstances? It would be wonderful if he could, but if it isn't in the cards, you should not start a family with him. Yeah, you have no onus on this. The dude is completely at fault, according to secular, and there's nothing you could do. You're chasing you realize the word fantasy, it means you've created it. You know what I'm saying? Like you get to take no responsibility in this, that you've created a situation where that man cannot fulfill anything that you're asking for. I feel like that's really unfair.
Also, all the things that she expressed in her message. My goodness, there is certainly room for improvement, but just based on relationships I have heard of, we are a long, long way from the basement.
Yeah, I agree.
when it comes to poor
This dude just does
relationships.
not seem so bad at all. I've heard some real humdingers on some
Oh,
husbands,
goodness.
and this dude seems like, I don't know. I feel like we could deal with him. We could go to
I'm glad
coffee
he's
and have
kind.
some of this straightened
He's
up.
always been kind to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
The raw material is totally work. Like you got good clay here.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some moldability.
Okay, you want one more or are we done?
Now let's do one more.
Here we go. Dear Live from the Path. I was co-host of a celebration where one of our guests, a seemingly very nice young man who was dating a relative, was observed goosing half a dozen women while on the dance floor. I don't know if my relative is aware, nor do I know how the recipients felt about it, but I wonder if what he did could be considered sexual assault. Should I talk to my relative about it? Would it be proactive and protective, or hurtful and intrusive? Well, you've been on the internet. I had a partner who once suffered from and is now in recovery from sexual addiction. I believe in advocating for awareness, recovery, healing, amends, open dialogue, and respect for everyone. I don't know what, if any, next steps are appropriate, other than to mind my own business. Can I please have some input? Signed, apparently a pamphlet.
I don't think he's coming to the next wedding.
No, the gooser.
No.
Yeah.
Family function veto.
I wonder who wrote this. Co-host of a celebration where one of the guests, a very nice young man. I mean, what part of him was nice, apart from his goosing? Was he respectful? I don't understand.
I don't think you can be a respectful gooser.
I don't think so either. It seems like the type of dude that think it would be all right to goose a bunch of ladies he don't know. That doesn't seem like a nice young man.
Think of what it would take. I mean, just fellas in the room. Like, what type of I don't even know what to call it.
Bravado?
Fortitude or something for you to get that close to it, like to just stick your hand somewhere like that.
I would not goose him.
That's outrageous.
Wait a minute. A goosing is where you pinch a lady on the butt, right? We're talking the same thing here?
I think that's in the realm of possibility
Yeah.
here. Things adjacent to that or that itself.
Like a hand, like I think it's like could be a hand just underneath,
It could
in
be
between the legs.
a number of things,
Yeah.
but all inappropriate.
Hudson's
Especially.
rightfully stayed out of this fricas.
Crap. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so far the dictionary is not helping. Goosing is the present participle of goose.
Great.
Really?
Yeah, that's pretty much all it offered.
Okay.
No, there's nothing nice about this young man.
Yeah. Anyway, like
It's so confusing that there's. Oh, very nice. That means he
Oh, yeah. Okay, hold on.
smiled.
To poke, prod, or pinch between or on the buttocks.
yeah.
Okay, that's about where we're at.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway,
I would say if it's what was the question about, like, what should I do?
yeah.
Well, this young I feel
I mean, was
like
he 8? If he's 8, this is a different conversation.
we're assuming he's a
Let's say he's
22-year-old or something
Okay,
like that.
all right, we'll put him
We're
at the
assuming he's an
22s.
adult. Does the young man at question, does his girlfriend, the relative, know? Is the relative aware? Because this girl brought this young man, this nice young man, not nice young, to this event. Is she aware? If she's not aware, I would tell her.
Yeah, I would tell her
I would
definitely.
Okay,
tell
now hold on.
Absolutely.
This is because this falls in dicey territory because it involves, like, she already brought in sexual assault in, right? But like this almost feels like an ABC conversation, right? The guy did the goosing. There's plenty of ladies there and ladies' husbands there to like deal with the gooser. Or like you as the co-host of just like the person who threw the party, are you in charge of bringing down the heavy on the gooser?
Yeah, well, here's what I would say is that, like, just because people were present and should be able to otherwise bring it up, defend themselves, it doesn't mean that they always do.
So if you found it gone undefended, someone's got to defend it.
Yeah,
Someone's got to come after that.
I would say I would leave it in the hands. I would say I would tell the girlfriend, and then between the girlfriend and then anybody else deciding whether they care to pursue any particular like, I don't think it's your gig to go, hey, I think you were sexually assaulted.
Right.
I think you bring up the behavior to the girlfriend, and then I think you allow other people to kind of make their own decisions. 'Cause, I mean, frankly, it does depend on the company you keep. Like,
Yeah.
this might not be a problem at all.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a relationship thing in there, a cultural. I think this guy's like wildly inappropriate.
Agreed.
But like the level of offense is in the eye of the beholder. I've often thought that, like, like I don't know what you'd have to do to me to be offended by it. Like I'd probably laugh at anything remotely like a goose. I'd be like, what the heck? Why would someone want to do
Somebody
that?
goosed me.
Right. I wouldn't. It wouldn't now. But like that's where my head is at.
That's right. That
But-
was only used as a comparison to like there's a sliding scale depending on who it happened to.
That's right. Like someone else, like it doesn't even particularly matter your background. It just like someone violated your space, and I mean, how your reaction to it is yours, and it gets to be yours. But like, I don't know that that someone else can prescribe what that is.
I would
Mm.
call the dude. Hey man, did you goose a bunch of people at this party?
What? No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Well,
The
then why did you-
reports are wild.
Then why did you ask that question? And like, people were drinking. There's no way that report is right.
Are you saying you did or did not goose?
I was nothing but respectful.
Does that mean respectful goosing?
No, I didn't. I
Look,
didn't,
man,
I
there's
didn't
6 people that think you goosed a bunch of people at this party, and the consequences are heading your direction. So I need to know, did it happen?
Specifically in the form of 6 husbands driving to your house right now as we speak.
Yeah, because I'm giving them all your address, bro. You walked around goosing everybody.
Craig is just jealous because of he's tied down in his marriage, and I still get to play the field.
Yeah, friendly heads up. They're coming your way.
Friendly heads up. You will not be invited to other events.
Yeah, done.
Well,
But if you do get invited to other events, just so you know, it's just because those 6 husbands are waiting for you in the parking lot.
That's right.
I'm
So
gonna
just assume if you're invited, they're going to be there.
I'm gonna
That's
goose
it.
them when they get here. but I didn't do that thing you
You're
said.
totally guilty. Yeah, I don't know. This is an awkward
I
situation.
think here's the caution. The caution is that you you go and like what is a problem for you, you overstep your bounds of a relationship that isn't yours. Now, it is the reason the boundaries are difficult is because oftentimes people don't speak up for themselves. They want to be the awkward person who complains about the thing when they probably should have. You should have mentioned it because the guy's he's a gooser.
Yeah.
And and somebody should. But like I think the caution is being an advocate for justice on someone else's behalf, where it isn't their consent, nor is it did they agree to how you're representing the situation, actually creates a bigger problem than the one that you have.
Yeah, it feels like, just on its face, it feels like there could have been drama involved. No one created it. And then after the fact, we're trying to drum it back up.
Well, yeah, it depends on if they are advocating for justice or not in this particular sense. So
Yep.
I'm going to assume that the person who wrote in is at least a position of, I don't want to say authority in the family, but
Yeah.
also a position of prominence as the co-host of this event.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Given that she is a co-host and in a position of prominence, I'm going to also make the assumption that the 6 people who were goosed were very unhappy and then told her about this. And so given that, at that exact moment, I assume that they want something to be done.
If that was
And
the case, yeah.
If that is the case, and given that you are a representative of the family from this position of prominence, then I would absolutely say something.
Yeah, Michael.
And even if it causes the drama, because I think,
Well, if there is a-
they asked you to do something, if they didn't ask, well, it's a different situation. But
yes,
still,
that's what I'm saying.
it's more
Like
complicated.
that's where I would agree. Like I would make sure that you're representing the concerns of the people that actually were impacted, not just your view of it or your personal offense.
Yes, because like in the situation with Ben, like the dude goosed Ben, and Ben's like, ugh, that's got to stop, dude. And then that was the end of it, right? And then she finds out about it 2 weeks later, and then like makes a big stink out of it. Ben's like, we already handled this. It's done. This is not a deal. Like we're letting this go.
Yeah, I mean, like that's locker room behavior. It happens everywhere. But now, to that extent, there could be some people where this is actually pretty uncomfortable, even though it's wildly kind of accepted, in male locker rooms around the high schools everywhere. And so, like again, I think you do have to represent your own perspective, but it does need to be specific to the person who is impacted. That's the only caution, is that you'd be surprised at what people don't have a problem with that you may.
Also, the line between accepted in locker rooms versus happening in locker rooms is an important distinction there.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think the level of inappropriateness is present regardless, but accepted versus happening versus commonplace, those different words
Yes.
have different meanings. But ultimately, I guess it just depends on how aggressive you want to get after this.
Yeah,
How much drama you
I'm going to stick with my advice that I don't think this is your business. I think the folks involved can handle this.
Now, Mike, if you were at a family, let's say you're at a family reunion, and Greg Hudson, I'm asking you the same question,
Sure.
and you saw somebody in your family goosing others, is there any way that is there a situation in which you wouldn't mention it?
I would probably not mention it at all if the people were people that can handle themselves, right? Like now if we're talking like my 8-year-old niece or something, now that's me, my grandma, sure, right? But like anyone in between.
Wait, somebody goosed your grandma, or your grandma's goosing a bunch of people.
No, someone goosed grandma.
Okay.
Oh. I
Knock it off,
believe
Granny.
I have some very large uncles
Uh-huh.
that would probably have dibs on this particular thing. So
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: it's like I'd like to see a dude try to goose my wife. That ain't me. I'd like to see it happen. My wife would tear this dude up. You know what I'm saying? And so like I don't know. It sounds wrong because like the current culture is like we got to stand up for this stuff and we got to stop it, right? And like I don't disagree. If people feel uncomfortable about it, yeah, it probably needs to quit. But like they have the complete freedom to handle it themselves too. And if they want to make a deal out of it, I think they can. And if they want to let it go, I think they can. Like we should give them the freedom to not make it a big deal, because like basically we're tying them the other way, right? We're saying like in the past we'd go, hey man, this behavior is totally acceptable, not a big deal. I don't care how it made you feel, right? And then put them in a box, right? And now we're doing the exact opposite that says,
Right.
This thing happened to you. We're definitely going to make it a big deal. I don't care how you feel about it.
Right.
And like that doesn't seem right either.
Right.
And so like if someone came to you and said, look, this made me very uncomfortable and I need to know it's being addressed, you go, I'm on it.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about this. I'll get this handled, right? But like if, like I said, like the ages kind of matter to me, but like adults-ish, I just feel like it's their business. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm coming off as insensitive, but like I just feel like it's theirs to handle.
well, it's situational.
Yeah.
It is very
it's always
situational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Secular answers. If what your relative's date did was observed by other guests, he must have been the talk of the party. I do think that what happened bears discussion with your relative. However, rather than frame it in terms of a sex addiction, it might be more accurate to suggest that he may not know how to handle alcohol.
That was shorter.
Wait, were they boozing?
Well, it's a party, dude.
Well, I mean, maybe they're drinking something manly like a ginger ale.
A ginger ale, and the dude's all hopped
Dr.
up on
Pepper.
ginger ale goosing people. Sounds unlikely.
Sugar high.
You're right. He probably had a Dr. Pepper. Hey, you're listening to Live from the Path. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. We very much appreciate it. If you got any comments for us on the show, give us a call or text on the Bob Eisenhower Live from the Path complaint line. That's 515-517-0085. Also the place where you can send us anything that you, any thoughts on the show that makes sense from the macro level for this 500 show celebration that we got coming up. It's going to be a real letdown. I know that. I'm going to say, look, it's, 500 shows. But anyway, we would love to hear from you. In the meantime, thank you, Greg Hudson, for coming in. Always appreciate your insights.
Word.
And be faithful in the means. God will handle the ends. You've been listening to Live from the Path.